I get a lot of questions regarding cast iron or carbon steel seasoning issues. In this video, I'm going to attempt to summarize some of the common seasoning mistakes and troubleshooting techniques to help you figure out what went wrong and steps to fix it. Let's dive in. Okay, so this is a really touchy subject, and it's incredibly hard for me to figure out exactly what went wrong with your pan or cookware without actually seeing it. But over the last 2 years, I've been getting contacted a lot by many different people asking me what went wrong with their seasoning and how I could help. And a lot of you guys have been reaching out to me to my social media, my Instagram and Facebook, sending me pictures or even videos of your cookware. And I've been trying to help you guys, and in most cases, I've been able to help a lot of you. So for this video, I decided to kind of consolidate all of that information and release a video with basic issues or mistakes I've seen people make, common mistakes, and hopefully provide some troubleshooting to get you on the right path and get you closer to a better seasoned pan. So before we can go any deeper, let's talk about seasoning. What exactly is seasoning? There's a misconception that seasoning is a very thin layer of wet oil to give your pan a slick surface, and that is not entirely true. Seasoning is just oil baking onto your cast iron or carbon steel pan through the process of polymerization. See, it gives your cookware that classic black patina, and seasoning really forms a neutral, easy release cooking surface, but its main function is actually to protect your cookware from rust. You still need to practice good cooking techniques, watching your temperatures, focusing on temperature control, and the fundamentals of cooking. A common mistake I see all the time is having a dirty pan to start with and trying to season that. If you have a carbon steel or a bare metal cast iron pan, for example, you have to make sure that you clean out and scrub out all of the shipping grease, all of the manufacturing protective layers that they put on there for the shipping process to prevent your pan from rusting. Oftentimes you'll find a protective wax, and it's really hard to get out. A good way to find out if you got all the protective wax out is to heat up your pan on the stovetop and then let it cool slightly. Take a paper towel and try to gently rub the inside of the pan. If the paper towel gets caught at all, then you know you still have some wax there. See, what happens is the wax heats up and melts and then cools off a bit and becomes really sticky. So it's a lot easier to find through that method of using a paper towel. But a lot of people think that their pans are clean, when in reality there's still some wax left over. Now likewise, another common mistake that I see a lot of people make when it's time to season their pan in the oven is when they're applying a thin coating of oil, they'll use a paper towel to spread that oil around, and the paper towel has a lot of lint. You are now contaminating your pan, and it's going to be a lot harder for that oil to bond. So it's a good idea to spread that thin layer of oil using a lint-free towel or rag. I made a video on two really popular methods of seasoning. The potato peel method, which really does help you further clean out your pan using potato peels, salt, and oil, and the oven method. And if you're interested in that video and those two methods, you can find them here. So what about troubleshooting seasoning that's really sticky? So even after you've already seasoned your pan, you may feel some really sticky areas. What actually causes that, and how do you troubleshoot it? There really are three main reasonings behind having sticky seasoning. The first one we've already kind of touched up on, but it's having a dirty pan to start off with and trying to season that. It's important you start off with a clean pan that's lint-free. The next common reason for this is using way too much oil to season your pan and not spreading it out in an even thin layer. You want a nice thin layer so the oil has a chance to polymerize and bond. And then finally, during seasoning, your temperatures were either too low or you didn't leave the pan in long enough to allow the oil to actually bond. And that's actually a very common mistake. Seasoning is a ratio of temperature and time. The lower the temperature, the longer you have to leave it in there. The higher the temperature, the less you have to leave it in there. Which brings me to my next segment. Let's talk about temps. What temperature is actually good for seasoning? It all depends on the oil that you're using and the smoke point of that oil. Ideally, you want to use oil, lard, fat, whatever it is that you want to use with a high smoking point. The idea behind this is if you're going to be using your pan or cookware for high heat temperature cooking, like searing and so forth, you don't want to use an oil or fat that has low smoking point. It will actually deteriorate if you shoot it way above its smoking point consistently, and eventually your seasoning will start to flake and break down. So a good rule of thumb is use a high smoking point oil or fat to season your pans to begin with. And theoretically, you'll never actually go way past that smoking point where it will damage the seasoning or deteriorate it over time. Now, generally speaking, there's two philosophies regarding temperature and smoking point when seasoning your pans. The first one is actually going just below the smoking point or right at the smoking point, and then allowing the pan to season in your oven for a longer duration. 2 hours, 3 hours, or so forth. The second method is taking that oil past its smoking point by about 20 degrees or so Fahrenheit, and then leaving it in the oven for a slightly less duration, around 45 minutes to an hour. Both methods require you to cool the pan in the oven along with the oven. So make sure you allow your pan to cool down inside the oven in that ambient temperature. I actually prefer the second method. Most ovens are actually not very accurate, so taking the oil 20 degrees Fahrenheit or so past its smoking point just ensures that, you're on the safe side, you are going past the smoking point of the oil. But of course, when in doubt, throw in a thermometer and monitor the actual ambient temperatures. That's the best way to go. Speaking of temperatures, I actually want to talk about another funny thing that I see a lot of people doing. There's a lot of people out there that think they need to be really macho with their pans, and they're doing some extreme things, like putting their pans in pizza ovens and going way past the smoking point, or putting their pans in like a campfire and setting them on fire. I actually found a really funny video. I think it was on Instagram Reels or TikTok or one of those short format videos. I can't find it. If I do, I'll link it below. But the guy is basically talking about how he seasons his cast iron or carbon steel. I forget what it was, but he basically puts it in a campfire and then pours a bunch of coals in there, really brings up the campfire to extreme temperatures. His pan was literally on fire. There was flames shooting from his pan. At that point, you're no longer seasoning the oil. You're literally setting the oil on fire. The oil is now burning. And if you start seeing flames shooting out of your pan, that's not the proper way to do it. There's no reason to go that macho. Actually, in the video, when he flips it over, a bunch of ash falls out. And of course, when he does the egg test, the egg has a bunch of black flakes and so forth. You can literally see that the oil burnt and it started to flake off. He thought he was seasoning, he was not seasoning. If you see flames shooting out of your pan, you're no longer seasoning or polymerizing the oil, you're literally just setting it on fire. Okay, the next troubleshooting items is how many layers of seasoning do you actually need? The answer to that is don't go crazy. People really get stuck on seasoning their pans 10 plus times and they don't actually use them and develop that natural seasoning. Your pan will actually take care of itself. I personally really think 3 total layers of seasoning is fine. If you have a pre-factory seasoning, just season it 2 more times. If you don't, shoot for 3 layers of seasoning. But please keep in mind, if your pan does come with a pre-factory seasoning, that seasoning is not always very good. So in some cases, you might want to consider stripping that base seasoning from the factory and starting all over. But again, I really do feel like 3 total layers of seasoning is a really good starting point. Now, keep in mind, arguably, that first layer of seasoning is the most important. It's the base. It's the foundation that all other layers of seasoning is going to rest on. So really focus on getting a good base layer. And then you can add a couple more layers of seasoning, but then start using your pan. Use it day in and day out. The pan's going to take care of itself. It's going to develop its own layers of seasoning, and you'll be happy that you did. Don't get stuck on adding a bunch of layers and doing an egg test or shooting for that perfect non-stick coating. That will happen naturally. Okay guys, I hope this was helpful and at least helped guide you in the right direction during your seasoning journey. Again, a lot of things can go wrong, so it's really hard for me to actually get really specific for your, exact scenario, but I think this was a good general guide and hopefully touched on some of the key areas and key mistakes that people make. As always, you're more than welcome to follow me on social media and send me a personal message, a picture, or a video with your specific issue, and I will try my best to help you. That's it for me, guys. I hope you found this video informative. Check out some of my other videos, and I will catch you on the next one. Take care, everybody.